Hey, I'm Nathan, the head of paid media and co-founder of Blue Sense Digital. In this video, I'll be running through the internal framework that we use for creating and scaling meta accounts for e-commerce brands. Specifically, I'll be running you through the two fundamentals of meta, the lens in which you should look at scaling a meta account, alongside the actual account structure that we use internally. So you can take this and directly plug and play it into your business. So I'll quickly minimize my webcam here so you can see the full slides, and we'll dive straight into things. There's two key pillars when it comes to meta advertising for e-commerce brands. Pillar number one is having a structured testing framework, and pillar number two is having strategic creative reiteration. What does a structured testing framework actually look like? This looks like a dedicated testing campaign, which is an ABO. It's really important that it is an ABO. If you set it up as a CBO, it moves the point of optimization up to the campaign level, which impacts the ability for us to make changes at the ad set level without resetting learning phases. And secondly, it's important that this is set up as a conversions campaign. I won't go into exactly why that's the case in this video, but I'd be more than happy to create follow-up videos here further explaining that decision. Under this campaign, we have different ad sets which are nestling different tests. As you can see in here as an example, we have test number one running alongside test two and test three. Now, what this actually looks like within an ad account, as you can see here, this is a screenshot from one of our ad accounts currently under management where it says BSD cold targeting. We'll come back to that in just a second. So the fundamentals of what you need to be following when you're running a test within this testing campaign is, number one, it needs to be a purposeful test. There needs to be an actual purpose as to why it's being tested. And then after that test is run, it's important to do a thorough analysis process. Understand why the test outcomed what it did, and then use that to reinform the next test. And that's why it ends up looking like a cycle of new tests that are run, where an analysis process is undergone, which then indicates what the next test should be. Now, let's define these terms in a little bit more detail. What is a purposeful test? Firstly, you need to understand the hierarchy of importance within your account. Are angles more important than value propositions? Are asset types more important than targeting? Is structure more important than all of this? And I wish in this video that I could give you a rigid answer and say that this is the exact hierarchy that all accounts follow, but it actually differs account to account. We've seen accounts where this has been completely flipped on its head, and where structural changes makes the largest impact on results compared to changes in the angle and the asset type. So one of the first things that you need to identify within your account and within the first few tests that you run is, what are the biggest needle movers? Is changing the structure making the biggest impact? Is changing the targeting making the biggest impact? Or is it the angles, value props, and assets? Secondly, you need to always be building a hypothesis. There is no point in running a test if you don't know what the outcome should be from that test. We need to be keeping variables constant. We only want to be changing one variable in each test, or else the data isn't going to be statistically relevant. And then lastly, all of these results need to be logged. It's all well and good running 10, 20, 30 tests a month, but if we're not actually logging the result, we're going to end up spinning our heels and just retesting the same things over and over again and not seeing progression within the account. Number two is the thorough analysis process. So what does a thorough analysis process actually look like? Well, firstly, we need to ask ourselves the question, why did the test fail or succeed? How is this going to inform the next test? And then how do we use this result to actually scale the account? Tying back into the account structure, what this ends up looking like is we have our test running. We then have our KPI, which we're using to measure whether the test was successful. If the test was successful, we continue running it and we look to move it out into scaling campaigns. If the test wasn't successful, then we do an analysis on those results and we reiterate to inform the next test that should be run. And you can see down the bottom here, if we have success out of these tests, we pull these out into their own dedicated scaling campaigns, whether it's CBO, a scaled ABO, or an Advantage Plus. It's completely dependent on the account, and that is outside of the field of this video. Meta pillar number two is having strategic creative reiteration. Now, this can make or break the profitability of a D2C brand. And why that's the case is because creative equals cash at the end of the day. It's expensive to make new content. You need to know how to either, number one, be able to create compelling content for pennies on the dollar, so be able to produce a lot of content for cheap. Or number two, you need to be able to know how to predict what content is going to perform well within an ad account, so that when you are looking for future iterations of content, you're doing a new shoot, you're reaching out to a new influencer to make a new pieces of UGC, maybe you're even engaging in a content creation agency. You need to know exactly what you're asking for, or else it's bound to not perform within the account. Now, even better, it's fantastic if you can do both. There's a lot of methods that you can use to create compelling content for cheap and then also predict what content's going to perform well. And that's where you get a really successful flywheel effect within a meta account, where we can quickly, rapidly reiterate on content creation while also having quite high predictive expertise in knowing what will actually perform well based on the tests and data analysis that we're doing within the account. Now, where our expertise really comes in here is doing that data analysis and being able to predict what content's going to perform well, reiterating that back to yourself so that you can then go and create that content that's actually going to perform in the following months. Now, back to the account structure, we have the cold targeting campaign. We then have a dedicated retargeting campaign. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly how we set this up internally for the best, most consistent results. At the account level, we simply have the retargeting campaign set up as an ABO. At the ad set level, we then have 90-day visitors. This is the only custom audience that we run. There's multiple reasons as to why we don't advocate for stacking custom audiences as well as excluding custom audiences. It ends up coming down to CPM inflation. The more custom audiences you place within an ad set, the more exclusions you make, the higher the CPMs will inflate, and you'll end up spending more to just essentially target the exact same people. We'd also recommend 90 days over shorter periods like 60, 30, and 14 because those shorter periods have smaller custom audiences, which once again results in higher CPMs. So you're going to be spending more money to simply place your retargeting ads in front of the exact same people. Now at the ad set level, we always recommend between 3 to 4 ads, and how we'd like to approach ad design and ad creation here is through an objection handling framework. So looking at users that end up on site, what percentage of users aren't converting? Maybe you have a 5% conversion rate, meaning 95% of users aren't actually following through with a purchase. How can we handle the objections that those 95% of users had that limited them from following through with making that purchase? Now, maybe 20% of users aren't converting because they were price conscious. Another 20% of users weren't converting because they didn't trust a brand. And another 20% of users didn't convert because they didn't trust that the product was at the level of quality that was claimed on site. Well, within the 3 ads that we're running back to those users, we want to be ensuring that we're directly handling those objections. So for price sensitive consumers, maybe we have a discount code, or we price anchor and reiterate the value of the product. For those that don't trust the brand, we reiterate that we have 50,000 plus customers and 5,000 5-star reviews. And for those users that didn't trust the actual quality of the product and what was being claimed on site, we have a piece of user-generated content that reiterates how high quality the product is and demonstrates the product in use. And so just to recap the video, we went through the 2 fundamentals of Meta, which was having a structured testing framework, doing that through a conversion-based ABO campaign, where we then go through a thorough analysis process that then reiterates into the following tests that are being run. As we find things that are working within the account, they get pulled out into their own dedicated scaling campaigns. On top of that, we have a dedicated retargeting campaign that's targeted at 90-day visitors, where we're handling objections within the creative assets that we're placing within that ad set. That then brings me to the end of this video. Please let me know if you have any questions at all. I'd be more than happy to create follow-up videos on this topic.